But I think there's a moment here, and I don't think the churches have seen it. There's a moment that's ripe where the figure of Jesus in England, in secular England, the UK, the figure of Jesus is so unknown now. His teachings are so unknown that they are almost fresh.
With the saints, we've got an opportunity to really pull those stories down to the local level. It's like, well, okay, forget what you believe. Come and experience these places, or come and see the place where St. Cuthbert lived, and look at the island where he lived, look at the water around it and how it smashes against the rocks. And once you see that, I knew that that was a very rich and meaningful life.
Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm here today at this very fitting location of the ruins of a 12th century Cistercian abbey here in North Yorkshire to introduce something today which I know both me and Ryan here feel is very exciting. Something that we've been developing for a few months, something we're calling Disciples of the Divine Logos. This is going to be online and in person, meetups talking about meaning, rediscovering the figure of Christ, the role of the saints, a lot of stuff that people have been discussing online. If you clicked on this video, no doubt the algorithm has suggested it to you for a reason. So I'm here today with Ryan. Ryan, it's great to be with you.
Yeah, nice to be here. Yeah, so just to introduce myself, for those who don't know, obviously my name's Ryan Seeley, and I've been interested in symbology, mythology, fairy tales and Christianity for the last sort of 3 or 4 years, and it's really been something that's caught my attention and pulled me into it. So I was a material atheist growing up. I grew up non-religious.
Yeah, so the really interesting thing about myself and Ryan is we've got similar backgrounds. Both coming from outside of the church. I was a kind of agnostic, came to faith in the last sort of few years, and it's very unlikely the journey that we've been on. Many of the people watching this will probably be over in the US. Britain is an extremely irreligious country. I mean, both of our backgrounds, very modest, didn't go to public schools where they might still have chapel, even if no one's really a worshipping Christian. They still have these vestiges of Christianity. For both of us, and there wasn't a familiarity. For me, there was no familiarity with the Christian story. And now I'm on this crazy journey, and I met Ryan at a Jonathan Pajot event last year in Dublin.
Yep. And
so here we are, having been on our own separate journeys, coming from this non-Christian background to doing what? What are we doing?
What are we doing? Following our intuition, I think, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we both sort of decided and came to this realization that we needed to do something. We was watching a lot of videos online, and you get these kind of ideas, but when you don't have anyone to share it with, or where you're sort of a bit isolated, and I think what we've been able to do by finding each other, we've obviously both made the decision to go to a Jonathan Pajot event, hoping we'd find someone who was a bit like us. We managed to find each other, even though we only spoke for like 40 seconds or something like that. Yeah. In the moment, we managed to sort of somehow get back in touch with each other. Yeah. And from there, we had a feeling that we really needed to do something, but we didn't really know what it was. And I think we've sort of landed on bringing together like-minded people in person, so that online but in person as well, focusing really on the in-person meetings and building a community or some fellowship and getting together people that have got similar ideas, that are willing to sort of discuss these and sort of wrestle with these ideas and what that means for our lives.
Yeah. So really in the last year since we met, we've been kind of knocking our heads together and thinking about what we can do. And we've settled on a concept, a vision for this community, as you mentioned, and it's called Disciples of the Divine Logos. And why don't you tell people a little bit about what's behind that, what's behind the name?
Yes, I mean, really the name's about bringing together the part of us which has been drawn into Christianity, and then the part of us which is the disciples part, which people will probably associate with that. And then Logos, this more mysterious part, at least from our culture's perspective, something which isn't really that well spoken about. I mean, you hear it a little bit more online, or at least in the sort of...
I never knew about 10 years ago, I'd never heard this Logos.
Never had I.
And let alone that is an image of Christ in John's Gospel.
Yeah, and I think that's why we're sort of using this really sort of ancient way of understanding Christ, in the name, along with this quite modern way of understanding. I mean, disciples are associated with Christianity in the culture, obviously. But what's really exciting about it, I think, for me, is that we're trying to focus on narrative and on mythology and on symbology and all these different things, and the saints play a key role in sort of bringing all those sort of things together. So focusing on the people who did exist where we live and in our part of the world, that we can actually visit places. We've got relics of. There's mythologies around. There's street signs named after, schools named after, churches named after. We've got all this sort of all this history that's baked into the landscape and into the civilization, and we want to go in and sort of try to sort of pick out that and bring that back to life and breathe some life into it. Because it's there still. Luckily, it's regardless of how few people are actually paying attention to it, the amount paying attention to it's not zero, so it can still be sort of given a new lease of life, I think.
Yeah, so the title of this video kind of alludes to a lot of this stuff, and so we both met at an event last year in Dublin. Called, what was it called? Christianity in the Cave?
Yeah, something about the sacred, Christianity and the bush soul of Christianity, I think was
that was it. Yeah, title, and so this was an event organised by Marcus at More Christ, where Jonathan Pajot, Paul Kingsnorth, and Martin Shaw came to speak on a lot of these similar themes. And so since then, we both live in fairly close proximity in England, and so we've been meeting and talking, and we both came together, it's fair to say, to try and address this question of what do we do now? We're often speaking in a way about the Christian faith which is slightly alien to the church, and so we kind of feel there's a need to facilitate more conversations, more kind of spaces for meaning making, fellowship, for people to come together and bring these perspectives.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think what we've sort of been doing is trying to develop something that we would have joined in with had it been already existed. So we both know that there's this, we definitely have a need, I think, to find other people who are along similar lines to us and have gone down the same sort of path, or on the same sort of journey. And we found a bit of that in Dublin. There was that sort of group of people had all sort of had a lot of them had similar paths, and I think that obviously we found each other there, and we're trying to now facilitate people sort of community forming around these ideas, and hopefully being able to discuss it a little bit more, sort of figure out what that means for us, what that means for Christianity in England specifically, and I'm really trying to go deeper on just sort of go down that road, I suppose. And
it's great. So it's interesting, we're here very deliberately in the ruins of a monastery. This was dissolved just before the time of the English Reformation. And I think there's a real sense in this country, when you come into faith, into belief, of just how diminished the faith is. There are so few people, I know so many of my friends from before coming to faith and not Christians, in a way this is kind of an apt image for where we are. And so there's something very unusual in the journeys that both myself and you, Ryan, have gone on, I think, in that we know around 85% of the UK population don't go to church. They might still, I think it's just under 50% still tick Christian on the census, but there are so few people who profess to believe in Christianity that really it's kind of like, where do we go now with this? Because not only are we in a minority in the sense of being people who believe in Christ, but we're also in an even smaller minority in that we also take this kind of narrative approach to faith, where we're in a narrative, and we're going to hopefully talk about this later and in a lot of the work that we do, and we think the saints have a real place in the project that we're kind of proposing, and some of the legends associated with the saints, particularly the northern saints for this part of the country, to a really rational Christianity, a really kind of systematic Christianity. A lot of this stuff's even more foreign, so I don't know, we kind of got together and trying to work out what we're going to do about that, what we can do as two guys.
Yeah, and it's a very daunting task, obviously. But I think what we've started to do is we some of the things we sort of agreed on when we first met online we sort of made a list of things that we kind of believed and sort of narrowed down to what it was in common that we believed that sort of defined our thoughts on sort of whatever this emerging Christianity is that seems to be mostly online, it seems, at the moment. But what is that we actually believe? And then how do you bring that down into the levels of the actual real world church, the real world church experience? Because there is a big gap, I think, between what people experience or how they perceive the church versus what it is that we're talking about now, to the point where sometimes, like you said, it does feel you're definitely within a minority, even within the church, and that can be quite daunting. But I think that we've got a good approach at using narrative. We know that narrative is a huge part of what we do, or what the sort of our thoughts on what we need to focus on. Myths, fairy tales, all that kind of thing, and then along with this sort of I suppose it's a way of looking at theology and trying to. It's almost a bit more of a holistic way of looking at it. I think that you're trying to see it from, you're trying to take in all these elements like the narrative and the idea of, I mean, we both come from the sort of Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Peugeot sort of pipeline of way into this. And I think that's, speaking into a rational world, I think that's kind of what we've been trying to replicate in a way.
Because I think we've both been on these kind of journeys, and we've heard the term hero's journey kind of banded around a bit over the last sort of 6-7 years, largely because of Jordan Peterson, although he never uses it directly, but because of Joseph Campbell and a lot of these ideas. And we've come to I've seen the figure of Christ. I think initially I was not interested in the figure of Christ. I didn't think he was a historical figure. I think that's quite a widespread belief. And then I realized he was. And then you encounter these teachings afresh, combined with a full sense of the Christian story, including this idea, this notion that he's victorious over the forces of evil, a lot of which is missing in contemporary Christianity for various reasons. People are afraid, people don't want to sound, superstitious or, medieval, I suppose. So we kind of get a very watered down Christianity that's kind of void of this narrative sense. But really I don't want to put words in your mouth, Ryan, but I know we've spoken about this a lot. Like, we've kind of come into this in a real full way, where we see a kind of invitation to, follow in the likeness of Christ, follow in the likeness of the saints, and enter into a narrative, enter into a story, which is really what we want to offer other people, not in a sense of, we're experts, because we're not, we're learning, but we want to open a space where it's possible for people to not just be kind of reductive materialists who maybe go to church on Sunday, but actually to be fully in a re-enchanted vision of the world, where there's a place for you, where the source of all reality, the highest good, God, is revealing a way forward for you to become your fullest self, to people might think it still kind of sounds a bit corny, but to become a saint. And I think that the key word being obviously enchanting, we're focused on a lot. When we first started, we called what we were doing now some sort of enchantment projects, but we didn't really know which direction it was going to take. I think that's clearly, the participation is clearly that's the huge part of it, because like you said, it has to be invitational. Christianity doesn't seem that invitational in the world as we see it now. There has to be an element of participation in it, so it has to ask you to not just to turn up and observe, but to take part and to kind of to find your place in the religious world, I think. And then we've also, as you mentioned, the hero's journey. There's definitely some, as I know you've said this on a lot of your YouTube videos already, but the idea that people are clearly craving this hero's journey story, which seems to have existed forever as a pattern and as a narrative, and to be able to find that in the story of Christ, I think is so important, because of the way the hero story seems to be a fractal pattern, that you can see it. You can have a hero story kind of day, and then you can also have a hero story kind of life, and you can
I mean, even beyond a single life, a civilization seems to have a hero story sort of narrative, like an arc to it. And so I think being able to see these stories in your day-to-day life, people do that now with Star Wars, and Harry Potter's used quite a lot now, and you can see these patterns that are in the story, and then you see them in your life. And the truth is that all those stories are variants on the story of Christ. And I think once that's part of how I sort of managed to see how important these things was.
Yeah, so I think it'd be really cool to, if I can ask you a question, I want to put you on the spot, but I just to stress again how unlikely it feels for me to have become a Christian. But now, the figure of Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, seems to be the most compelling man who ever lived. And it's strange how unlikely, it's so obvious to see it. It's so obvious that is the case, because he's literally transformed most of the planet. So it was extremely unlikely, it feels extremely unlikely to have become a Christian and to see this figure of Jesus as God, as the divine Logos, the divine Word. But I'm aware, someone might have clicked on this who's not fully in this. They might, most of society is not suddenly having, there isn't a religious revival going on, let's just say. What do you kind of say to someone who kind of likes the idea of a hero's journey, or likes the idea of the stories reveal truth to us, but it's still like, I just don't see that in the figure of Christ?
Yeah, I think it is a really good question, because that's been, for me personally, the biggest hurdle. I couldn't see it before, and now I seem to be able to see it, and trying to sort of retrace my steps, if you like, and follow the breadcrumbs and figure out how I got from there to here, as a way of figuring out how you can get someone else from there to here, is quite tough, especially in the world we live in. I think that the world, is becoming, we're seeing an increase in interest in things like spirituality. I think that people really sense deep down that there's more to the world than just the material level of the world. And I think you can really see that in people, that there's a strong sense that there must be more to life than, it can't just all be, an unfortunate accident that people have popped into existence, and life is nothing but consciousness is a byproduct of evolution that's just could have not equally not been there, and then if that was the case, if that is the case, life's just a one big tragedy. That outlook, I think, it just doesn't offer people anything, and it's not productive for people, and it can consume people, I think. And I feel like what people are starting to see, at least I can speak personally for me, is that, and I saw this in the biblical stories actually, with the help of Jordan Peterson, that the odds of things sort of lining up the way that they haven't, that the fact that the Bible is and the story of Christ is so almost so perfect, even from it's so strange and perfect, which is what's weird about it. It doesn't seem obvious at all. Every time when I read the Bible, there's things in it that I'm like, why would you put that in there if you was writing a story trying to convince people of this God? It seems strange, but then once you kind of, as soon as you realize what that means, it just takes you deeper and deeper into it, and you realize that there's something about it that's just too compelling to have just happened by chance. And I think perhaps the way into it is just to try to relate what people already believe. I mean, no one believes that. Everyone knows who Gandalf is, and if you try to convince them that Gandalf is just an actor and that he's not really doing magic and things like that, it's just totally irrelevant. And I think once you start to see, like, well, the stories that are sort of out there already, if you can connect that to the idea that these things there's something higher that exists above Gandalf, like he represents something, and that is a force in the world, and the reason that you like it is because you know what that force means. It's this sort of wisdom, and this, with the saints, we've got an opportunity to really pull those stories down to the local level and to the place where people actually live and operate with their lives, and say, these places are part of a story too. And you're in that story if you want to be. It's just a matter of participating.
I want to get onto that. I want to get onto this element of the saints in a sec. I think just returning to the figure of Jesus a minute as well. I think what you're saying is looking for the things that you already find compelling.
Yeah.
Things often in a narrative. We kind of live in a society without heroes today, so we find our heroes in fiction, as strange as it might seem. But if people actually think of what they're spending their time on, they realise it's perhaps largely fictitious. If you then go a level up and allow yourself to offer some of your time to thinking that there might be something above that, there might be something. Famously, The Lord of the Rings is not an allegory for Christianity, but it's certainly informed by the Christian faith of its author, deeply Christian themes. Take a step up. Take a step back from maybe what you're obsessed with and think about something bigger. But I think there's a moment here, and I don't think the churches have seen it. There's a moment that's ripe where the figure of Jesus in England, in secular England, UK, the figure of Jesus is so unknown now. His teachings are so unknown that they are almost fresh. Again, seek and you'll find, knock and it will be opened. The Beatitudes, where your treasure is, there your heart will be. You'll know a tree by its fruits. Some of them are in the Old Testament as well. But these pithy statements that really have a profound depth to them, they're so unknown that if you actually I had this conversation with Jonathan Pajot online just over a year ago, and I was asking him a lot about attention, because he talks about attention a lot. If you just take a step back from the distractions from YouTube, social media, whatever, finish this video though. But if you just take a step back and give your attention to something higher, and Jesus says, seek and you will find, knock and it will be opened. I think that's what I found in my life, is something that was coming to me through some of the books I was reading, some of the guys I was watching on YouTube. I suddenly gave the figure of Christ a chance. And I did just think of him as a figure, whereas now I think of him as God. I believe he's God. But giving my attention to that higher thing suddenly opened up this entire world now, which I feel I can see. And it's the challenge is to help other people see it.
Yeah, no, I agree. My brother once said to me, was having quite a deep conversation, and we was both starting to sort of think about Christianity or spirituality. Maybe at that point it was more sort of the way we looked at it. And he said to me, have you ever thought about what might happen if you just for a moment sort of try to accept the idea or contemplate the idea that Jesus Christ might have actually existed? Have you ever actually seriously taken that or considered that? And I knew I hadn't. I knew that I'd not really ever considered that seriously. And as soon as I did, the implications of that are just so grand and vast. It was very disturbing to me at first. I was a little bit frightened by it, because I knew that if I did seriously take that sort of claim seriously, and did actually consider maybe these things maybe there's actually something to them. What if this actually happened? If I just think about that for a moment, and I think that was probably life-changing for me in the end. That contemplation of just why not just take this idea and just, what happens if this is true? What would that mean? And as soon as I did that, I was it sort of threw me completely into a spin, because the implications of that are just so grand and so overwhelming. But what I think after I'd done that, I sort of thought, I sort of was able to weigh up the pros and cons of living in either world. So I could be wrong about either of these things, but the world I was currently living in was not really working for me, and it definitely wasn't fulfilling me in a deep, meaningful way. And if I accepted that the story of Christ was true, which I didn't do immediately, but I thought I'd try and consider it, I knew that was a very rich and meaningful life. And what I thought I knew then pales in comparison to what I've sort of feel about it now and what I know about it now. So I think that people are looking for fulfillment and meaning, and they're looking for a deep sense of purpose and meaning. I think that just considering, just a switch in the worldview from a secular sort of materialist perspective to one where God came to earth and died because he loves you is a huge sort of, the implications of that are just so overwhelming that it will.
I feel, yeah, I'm completely, and I almost feel like I want to say to someone, I mean, we're talking very hypothetically here, that there's someone hypothetically listening that this speaks to, maybe there is, but I guess I'm talking to myself as well. I kind of feel like saying myself a few years ago, what have you got to lose by trying this? And I know that most Christians, most people in the church don't speak that way. Try it. They don't speak, they kind of, I don't know, we've all probably got pretty diverse experiences, but in my experience, it might be like, you know, people come to faith because they have a big flashing moment. I almost feel like saying, try it. Like there could be the world as it is. There could be the world of the kind of post-enlightenment, now postmodern world where everything's kind of a bit chaotic and everything's kind of made up and it's all just loads of narratives at play. Or as you said, there could be this world where God came to earth as a man and revealed the fullest, you know, the kind of highest way to be, the highest codes of conduct, the highest way to live, revealed what goodness itself is in his actions and his deeds, and he overcame the forces of darkness, which we surely all feel that this world is not as it should be, and that there are things at play that aren't right, that need putting right, that need addressing. I think we often take that out in the kind of political sphere. You could think about that. You could think about the world is kind of empty void, you know, get loads of money, have a good time, go on loads of holidays, vacations, or there's this world where right where you are, you can be in touch with the divine, who is goodness, who fills you up and transforms you and transforms the life of your family, gives meaning, purpose. You can have adventure in that sense, or you can go back to, you know, life before. I don't know. I kind of feel like saying, just try it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's what most Christians find, I think, or the people who've come to faith suddenly find a world of meaning. And sometimes, surprisingly, it even feels as though you're finding meaning where the people who were there before haven't seen it. I sometimes feel like that at church, where I feel almost over enthusiastic about the liturgy and the songs, and I can speak to people who've been going to church and have been Christians for years in my church, and they're just happy to go along. They've always gone, and they kind of accept they like the stories. They believe in Christ, and to them it's just what they do. But they don't seem that interested in really talking about, you know, the hero's journey narrative structure of Jesus.
Yeah. What are you talking about?
So
Let's sing some more hymns.
But I wonder sometimes if maybe that's just because the way that they've approached, maybe it's just the way that they've approached it was always there, and they've just continued this tradition.
Yeah.
And I'm coming at it, and as a you, from a position of never having this, and this all being new, like you said.
Yeah.
Jesus is now he's saying things that people have never heard before, and it's like, for the last 2,000 years, everyone knows what Jesus said, but all of a sudden we don't.
Yeah.
And when we hear them, it's so illuminating. And I know personally, for me, I discounted anything Jesus said up to a point because it just sounded so cliche and oversaid, but I'd never really thought about what does that mean, what he's saying, and sort of, like, I'd heard you should love your neighbour.
Yeah, I'd heard that.
Like, that was something I heard.
But like the notion of the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, like I'd never heard those sayings. If I had have heard those sayings, if I'd been to church and heard them, I would have kind of thought he's purely speaking of a fantastical escapism.
Yeah, castle in the sky.
A castle in the sky, yeah. But then understanding the deep mystery that he's revealing, and not having any preconceived theological framework, is very exciting. I think that's why people like Jordan Peterson, Jonathan Pajot are very successful here on YouTube, is because Jonathan Pajot is an Orthodox Christian, but he's approaching the Gospels in a kind of open way, in a kind of much more ancient way, much more patristic way, where there's not like a preconceived idea of everything and everything fits into a perfect category. It can be slightly more fluid. There are multiple dimensions. You know, Jesus says, you know, not everyone who asks, you know, will enter the kingdom of heaven, or something like that. I'll put the words on the screen. There's a mystery to the transformation that he's proposing.
So when we went to Dublin, obviously Paul Kingsnorth was talking, and I found what he said quite interesting, because he was kind of talking about a very ascetic approach to Christianity, and almost like this sort of hermit monk style of Christianity that he found that compelling and appealing. And that's very different from what you see in the church today. I think that the idea of the church is usually quite community-based, which I think is a really good thing. But the idea of someone going off on their own for several years into a cave doesn't really fit that idea of what Christianity is. But I think to be able to, as you said earlier, about consider the whole and see what that has to offer. Just for example, I was talking the other day in my church about snake stones to one of the people who was going there, and they couldn't. I was telling them about St. Hilda. I was going into that just to see what they thought of it, really. And
so this is the legend of St. Hilda,
yes,
where her prayers turned this plague of snakes that attacked the town of Whitby into stone.
Yes, thank you for the context, Gus. I'm just
no.
I'm used to talking to you and not having to.
Yeah, we talk about stuff all the time.
Yeah, so yeah. But yeah, so I was talking to them about that story and about the snake stones themselves and being able to go find them. And they just, it was almost so far removed from the Christianity they knew that it was hard for them to really, it seemed like I was just talking about, it seemed like I was talking about a film or something that was totally detached from.
Yeah. There's a sense in which there's the historicity of Christ, there's the historicity of the Gospels, there's the Christ event, there's his crucifixion, resurrection in history, and that's kind of concrete. And we've got large swathes of Christianity that are people that go to church who are like, yeah, that's real, that's concrete, Jesus was a real person. But when you start entering the symbolic world, using symbols like turning snakes into stone, it's so far removed from them that they can't understand it. And they're almost worried perhaps, oh, you're implying this stuff's fantasy, so I'm not going to go there. Whereas I think the challenge that people like us have got is to really say, let's be quite honest, that the faith has always used imagery to speak of the ineffable. Like, we don't believe, for example, that Genesis 3, the story of the fall, is a scientific document.
Yeah.
We don't. I mean, I know there are plenty of Christians that do, and fair enough, but we don't. And so it's already there. We've got the images of serpents. We've got a deeply, deeply, profoundly true story. Like, I believe that the story is real. The story speaks of God. The story speaks of the fall. The story speaks of humanity's decision to turn away. But it is fundamentally a narrative which uses symbols to communicate something that's so complex in such a simple way. And I think that what we've seen coming in through this kind of narrative way to Christ is that all of these images, all of these archetypes are necessary, and they actually unlock a deeper existence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one of the conclusions that at least I've sort of arrived at, is that life is a narrative. I think that we live in narratives, and I think narrative might be the foundational layer of reality. That's everything else is built out of the narratives, because otherwise there's just stuff and no purpose and meaning associated with anything. It's impossible to do anything without the narrative structure. You wouldn't move or do anything if you didn't have any narrative. And I think because of that, to see narrative as fantasy and as something frivolous on the surface, I think that is how I used to view narrative. I didn't watch Lord of the Rings until I was 30, I think.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't grow up. I didn't really like the idea of fantasy because to me it seemed irrelevant.
Yeah.
But I grew up as a material atheist.
It makes the journey, Ryan, that you've come on even more unlikely.
Yeah, it does. But it's just I almost discounted that because to me it seemed like you'd have. I always read non-fiction books because I was like, why would I want to read about something that's not true? But I did it completely back to front. I was like, no, the fiction is where these deep patterns are expressed, and it's like people don't read things if they don't make any sense, and if they don't connect with them. Yeah. So the stories that connect the most are usually the most sort of, they have the most meaningful and the most sort of well fleshed out patterns in them. And I think that's what obviously the hero's journey is probably the primary pattern that we see that repeats itself in stories and through narrative. But there's something about being able to connect those narratives with your life, and you start to realize, oh no, all these narratives are playing like I know I kind of can see the basilisk in my own life, every now and again, I'm like, oh, there it is again.
Yeah.
And it's petrifying me, and I don't know how to deal with that.
And I think because I hear this kind of skeptic voice say, you know, I like that. I can take lessons from the Lord of the Rings. I can take lessons from Star Wars. I can take lessons from the Gospels, the teachings of Christ. But I think the piece that they're missing is Christ.
Yeah.
It's the piece they're missing is Christ. It's this call. It's this older form of Christianity as well. It's a largely pre-Reformation. You know, there's some good things in the Reformation, but it's largely pre-Reformation of this call to the spiritual life, the call to sanctification, which, I mean, many Protestants would still recognise that anyway, but I'm trying to be, you know, welcoming to everybody here. But it's this call that Christ sets forth to transform reality, to follow in his footsteps. If anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. You can have all the stories, but at the end of the day, it's just going to be a little bit of wisdom. But there's actually a call to say, your life, you were meant for eternity.
Yeah.
And follow me into eternity. And without that, it's just a bit of fun. It's just the kind of Victorian professor in his office reading about Arthurian literature. It's just escapism. Whereas I think the actual belief, which will come, even if I've had people on my little YouTube channel comment saying, I wish I could just believe. I'm so near it, I wish I could just believe. Pay attention. I think, pay attention.
Yeah, I like to think of the image of Christ being at the centre of the cross, that he kind of hangs on the centre of the cross, being that he's almost the coming together of like the kind of two planes of existence. You've got the material realm and the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
And he is at the centre.
This is the vertical and the horizontal, the heaven and earth, yeah.
He's the one that sort of holds it all together. He's the thing that sort of unites everything. Ironically, when he's hanging on the cross dying, that's kind of the strangeness of Christianity, which I think here's something that just a quick point to make. When we started talking, one of the things I remember saying to you was, as I started reading the Bible, bear in mind that I'd had no impulse to read the Bible ever, and I started to do it out of like, maybe I should read it, but I wasn't particularly called to read it. I'll read it and see if I can consider what if this happened. And I started to notice that it seemed like, as you've got Jesus talking to people in the Bible, but after I've been reading it for a while, you start to see that he's kind of talking to you as you're reading it. Like all of the things that he's saying are almost aimed right at you, and you can see that there's almost no way of avoiding it. Like he's talking to some random just some random person with leprosy, and he's giving sort of advice, but for some reason the advice, you know what it means in your life. You can see exactly what he's saying, and you can see it lands right on that part of you, which is like, why am I feeling almost like I'm in this story all of a sudden?
Yeah.
And I think that it speaks to how, if God actually came to earth, the words he spoke would probably be magic words, and they would probably be relevant forever. And it seems when you read the Bible like that is the case.
Yeah, and it's even with, like, you mentioned leprosy, and people kind of like, that's archaic. That's an archaic term, right? I mean, leprosy still exists in pockets of the world, but it's not an everyday thing for us. But even that, as a kind of, in a typological sense, we've all got leprosy.
Yeah.
We've all got something within us. It has, as you say, it has that kind of touch of eternity. You know, he says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away.
Yeah.
And look at this abbey that was built because of him. It's gone now. The Cistercians are still around, but this abbey happens to have gone. But his words are still here. This has passed away, but his words are still here. You know,
relevant as ever.
Relevant as ever. I feel like something that always comes up from conversations with guys talking about faith. You know, we're both in our early 30s-ish. When we go into church, we don't really see a big call to a demand to do anything, a demand to make sacrifices, a demand to be transformed. There are no challenges. But it's interesting in some of the sayings of Christ in the Gospels, he talks about his disciples doing the things that he does, or in fact even greater things than he does. I think it's in Peter's letter, in the first letter of Peter. St. Peter talks about sharing in the divine nature. There's all of this stuff which, talking about the hero's journey, Christ is clearly inviting people to participate in the life of God. And I think, okay, even if I didn't believe in God necessarily, I was an agnostic, the call to participate in the divine seems to be fundamentally part and parcel of Christianity. God becomes a human. What are you and I, a human? It's the call to participate in that divinity. That is so attractive, I think, for a lot of people, even if, they don't not sure about terms like God, or even for the moment, Christ. There's something in that's like the missing piece. And I feel like the disciples of the Divine Logos community that we're trying to start up, it is a space for exploring that and exploring what that might be like in your life. I mean, we're not trying to make a church or anything, are we? This is not one of the other thousands of churches, but
no, I think we want to sort of, obviously we're both Christians, and we're relatively new Christians in the grand scheme of things, but really what we're trying to do is create a space for people who are wrestling with these ideas about myth, about reality itself. Really, there's obviously philosophical implications of what we're saying. The idea of narrative being sort of a foundational structure is quite a big sort of claim, and those kind of ideas. And I think a lot of people like us, we watch videos of Jonathan Peugeot online, and then we're just left to deal with that on our own. And it's kind of like, I think it's good, you go to your church and try and talk to somebody about it, and they look at you like you've gone insane. and I think it's good, what we've started to realise is there's a need for us to be able to come together in groups, get together in a group, ideally in a place that's obviously quite got some significance to it, and just allow us to be able to have these conversations. Maybe get people in to speak to a group as well about some of these ideas, eat together, create a community out of it. Like you said, fellowship's quite an important thing, because something's going on. The road is as yet uncharted, but
I think it's important for me to stress, as I say, this thing that we're developing is not a church. It's not a substitute for church. It's like we're open. Like we're both in the Church of England. I'm in the Anglo-Catholic tradition of the Church of England. But like this is a space for people who are not Christians, people who are exploring the story of Christ, people who are Catholic, Orthodox, Anglican, whatever. Like this is just a space where people can come together. Maybe, a younger demographic than most English churches can come together. Hopefully, yeah. Hey, but you're welcome as well if you're a pensioner. You're welcome. It's a really exciting time, and I walk around abbeys like this. This is 10 minutes away from my house. I walk around abbeys like this almost every month, and I just think, what does the future hold? This is a symbol of a vanished element of our faith, and sometimes it can be very easy to get into a kind of doom spiral. I think it was Paul Kingsnorth said this: every society has a spiritual center, and ours is I'm pretty sure it was Kingsnorth, ours is a society which has suddenly removed that spiritual core. Every society grows up around a spiritual core. We're the first one in history to have suddenly removed that spiritual core, and we don't yet know what that looks like. We don't yet know how dangerous that is, to have nothing to moor us, nothing to root us to the ground.
It's a tree with no roots, ultimately.
Yeah.
A tree with no trunk, maybe.
Yeah. There is hope. There's tremendous hope. This technology has allowed people to share ideas, and so we just want to come together as what did you say to me, Ryan, before we started shooting? Like we're not we're just facilitators. We want to facilitate something. We've got these really exciting stories about the saints which feel like totally untapped in our country, at least. Tolkien, Lewis, all these guys, they knew, especially Tolkien, he was a professor of Anglo-Saxon. He knew the stories of the Anglo-Saxon saints. Sometimes I'm slightly envious of our American friends when there's so many Christians in America. Like there's a lot more community. It's a lot more easy for young guys to kind of find some way. It seems like that way anyway, to find a kind of Christian community. Young guys in this country, it's not. But this is an old country, and the ground, the trees, the wind still speak to me now that I've entered this world. It still speaks the names of some of these saints. Yeah. Some of these people who, I believe are rooting for us in every sense of the word. You can still touch the places that they've visited, and these are people, maybe coming from a tradition that doesn't sort of talk about people recognized as saints, in a way, these are like beacons of light. These are beacons of light that can show you how to access that life transformed by God.
Yeah, and it all sort of, everything points back to Christ.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the stories are so interesting. There's these narrative, almost mythologies that are formed around these saints, because they lived in such a way that was, even in the time where you've got monasteries everywhere and monks everywhere, these few people really shone. Like, there was something about them that was really different, to the point where stories developed around them and tales, and what gets remembered, I think, is very important, especially in a time where most things that got remembered were whatever got passed on in story form. So there's a reason that those stories exist still, and like you said, they've almost been forgotten. They're almost gone, but luckily we have them. We have the internet. Lots of people still have access to them, and hopefully we can amplify them and sort of bring more eyes onto these stories and to that mythology that's already exists on the landscape that we live.
That's it. I think that's it as well. For me, the saints are the element that take this beyond online discussion. And even, as I say, this is not a substitute to church, but even just beyond the kind of Sunday morning element that you have in the Christian life, this, for me, and living in an old country, the saints bring us out into places like this.
Yeah.
They bring you. We went on a little pilgrimage, myself and Ryan, a few months ago. We went to the holy island of Lindisfarne, which is one of the most important Christian sites in England. And there are places there where the ducks are known as cuddy ducks after St. Cuthbert. Like, there's this, that's a kind of quaint example, but there's this real connection that still exists, as you say, almost forgotten, but it draws us out into this into a world full of adventure. I kind of feel like I can't quite explain it, but it draws you out of just the theoretical, of just maybe reading the Bible, into a world that you actually is enchanted, is rich, is, wonderful.
Yeah, it really is. It's almost like the participation is the final piece of the puzzle. So earlier on, you asked about how we get people who maybe see the stories as a nice sort of thing, but it can't really land for them. They're like, I just can't believe it. There's something about it. Well, the participation is like, well, okay, forget what you believe. Come and experience these places. Come to the place where this miracle was said to have been performed, or come and see the place where St. Cuthbert lived, and look at the island where he lived, and look at the water around it and how it smashes against the rocks, and how it's just all these different elements come together, and you're like, all of a sudden you can paint this picture of this actual story, but it's connected to the real world. It's like it's connected to a real place.
Yeah.
And once you see that, I think it just helps you make the connection between this thing that is clearly it sort of helps you bridge the sort of mythical and narrative world into bring it home.
And a great example of that is, we mentioned Tolkien a few times, is the figure of St. Oswald. So not all of these saints are just monastic figures. Like, St. Oswald was a king. He's the kind of first great English Anglo-Saxon Christian king, and he planted his cross at Heavenfield. We went there a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so there's the story there of him, which has parallels to Aragorn in the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much here that's undiscovered, and we hope to kind of talk about this and kind of bring it to the fore again, and see what speaks to people, I think.
Yeah, these figures have such great qualities as well. Like, I know just the few that you've highlighted definitely have their own very well-defined qualities to them. Like, you have the ascetic monk in Cuthbert, but then you also have the saintly king soldier in Oswald.
Yeah.
And then you have the abbess, who for some reason is connected to turning snakes into stone, and there's all these elements to it which are so full of meaning and symbolism.
Yeah.
And I think that it's just waiting to kind of be picked at and to unravel, and for people to dive into those stories.
Yeah.
And I think we spoke about the event days and where to do them and what to do on those days, and we've had some really good ideas of I think, about ways of getting people not just visiting these places, but actively like participating in the stories.
Yeah.
Like, it's not enough just to read about them and see pictures and videos. It's not enough just to just go and visit and sort of walk around the museums and sort of all that's great, but there's something else to actually really take in really get involved, like to go to the beach on Whitby and look for snake stones, and to maybe go in the water in where St Cuthbert would have swum with the otters, and all those things to go to Heavenfield and just sort of go onto the fields around.
Yeah, that's
to try and picture
the place where Oswald apparently planted his cross is actually called Heavenfield.
Yes.
So it's just like, it's just unbelievable. Yeah.
I think that helps bring it all together, is this participation. And I hope that people out there really do want to sort of participate themselves, find their own. I remember listening to a Martin Shaw conversation with Jonathan Peugeot, and he said something like, the great mythical stories happening right now, like it's not like myth's not something that happened and is now over. It's like it's happening now. And he said something like, find your seat at the table and get involved, like join, like get to the table. Like I always like to picture a round table. We're probably knights there, even though I'm talking about the modern world. But find your seat, find your part in it, and then do what you can to kind of, tilt yourself towards the forces of good rather than evil. I think is what we're all being asked to do.
Yeah.
Just in a very abstract way, and I think we need to make it less abstract and more invitational, and sort of, I think that's hopefully how we do it.
So Ryan, it's been great having this conversation, and thanks if you've stuck around to the end of the video.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And if you like this, if this sounds good, then please head on over to our website, subscribe to our newsletter. It's all free, and that'll keep you up to date with everything that's happening. But wherever you are with all this, I think we both feel it. Meaning is coming back. Dragons are going to be slain. So let's do it.
That's great.